Why did no one notice the way she moved? On that blistering afternoon, every pair of eyes at the Camp Lejeune firing line was fixed on the rifles, the targets, or the wind flags, but not on her. A woman in plain khaki coveralls, auburn hair pulled back in a no-nonsense knot, hands resting on a leather satchel worn smooth from years of use. She blended so seamlessly into the background that the SEALs barely spared her a glance. Just another contractor, another tech rep from DARPA. Nothing worth their attention. Except for Colonel Michael Blackwood. From his post on the observation tower, the old soldier's binoculars tracked her every step. He wasn't looking at her face or her badge or the satchel she carried. He was looking at the way her body aligned when she touched the rifle bench. Not curiosity, not casual, instinct. The stance of someone who had lived behind a scope so long that the rifle was no longer a tool, but an extension of her nervous system. Blackwood felt a chill, the kind he hadn't felt in decades. The last time had been in the jungles of Cambodia, 1985, the day he'd come face to face with Anatoly Petrov, a Soviet sniper whose eyes still haunted his memory. And now, as the woman in khaki leaned over the military's newest pride, the M210 sniper system, that same unshakable instinct pressed at the back of his mind. She wasn't DARPA, she wasn't here by chance. Something about her presence tugged at buried memories. And Blackwood, a man who had spent a lifetime burying ghosts, suddenly wondered if this afternoon was about to dig them all back up. Below him, the SEAL struggled. The M210, sleek, futuristic, the pinnacle of American engineering, was supposed to hit targets at 1,800 meters with near-scientific precision. But the team hadn't landed a single shot all afternoon. Unusual winds ripped down from the ridge line, swirling currents that made the rounds dance unpredictably in flight. Petty Officer Jason Hayes, the team's star marksman, slammed a fresh magazine into the rifle with a muttered curse. "Piece of junk won't hold zero in this wind." His voice carried, sharp and irritated, a thin edge of arrogance layered over frustration. A few chuckles from his teammates, a release valve, but it didn't last. Their failure stung. Elite shooters weren't used to missing. And that was when Hayes noticed her. The woman with the satchel. Quiet, deliberate, methodically checking the rifle on the bench as if the entire scene around her, the grumbling, the missed shots, the bruised pride didn't matter. He raised his voice, letting the sarcasm cut like barbed wire. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this isn't the ladies' auxiliary ski shoot. This is a Tier 1 range. Maybe you can fetch us some coffee instead." More laughter, louder this time, the kind that feeds off group comfort and collective dismissal. But she didn't answer. She didn't even glance in his direction. Her focus stayed on the weapon, her hands moving with a precision that was almost unnerving, fingers brushing each component with the intimacy of muscle memory. Blackwood lowered his binoculars, his jaw tightened. He'd seen this before. Not here, not now, but decades ago when a different sniper, Russian, cold-eyed, patient as stone, had moved with that same exact economy of motion. When you've lived through the silent chess of counter-sniping, you never forget the language of a professional. The lieutenant at Blackwood's side murmured, "Sir, weather confirms the wind's bad, swirling vectors across the range. Should we suspend?" But the colonel didn't answer right away. He was already somewhere else, lost in memory. The crack of rifle fire in Cambodia, the branch that had splintered inches from his skull, the chilling realization that another man, unseen, was watching him through a scope. He remembered the face of Anatoly Petrov, and he remembered the feeling, the knowledge, that he had not killed the man's legacy when he wounded him. Some enemies lived on in the blood of their sons. Blackwood's hand clenched the railing of the tower. His voice came low, almost to himself. "She knows she's been here before." "Sorry. Get me a secure line to the Pentagon. Priority Alpha, now." The lieutenant blinked, startled but moved to obey. Down on the line, Jason Hayes was still fuming. He'd been groomed as the team's sharpshooter since Afghanistan, 32 confirmed eliminations to his name, more than a dozen more in classified operations. Pride was his armor. And yet, somehow, the quiet woman in coveralls was undermining it without speaking a word. She crouched, examined the rifle's targeting module, and scribbled something into her notebook. Equations, vectors, wind adjustments, her handwriting sharp, efficient, almost surgical. Hayes frowned. Nobody wrote things down like that anymore. Everyone trusted the ballistics computer. Waste of time, he muttered. The system's the problem, not the shooter. And then, almost as if the air itself shifted, Colonel Blackwood's voice rang down from the tower. Petty Officer Hayes, enough. Ms. Morgan has some observations about the weapon system. You will listen. The laughter stopped. Silence fell across the range. Hayes's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. He glanced at the colonel, then at the woman, and back again. With respect, sir, we've been here all day. No one's hitting the target. It can't be done. Not in this wind. Morgan, Catherine Morgan, though no one yet knew the name, closed her notebook with calm precision. She rose to her feet, not with defiance but with inevitability. The kind of quiet certainty that draws silence from even the most skeptical crowd. She approached the firing line. No wasted motion, no nerves, just purpose. Hayes smirked, folding his arms across his chest, confident she was walking into her own humiliation. The other SEALs watched with a mix of curiosity and suppressed amusement. Blackwood watched with dread. And in that moment, standing behind the M210, Catherine Morgan felt the weight of years pressing in. The last time she had done this, it had been on a rooftop in Fallujah. Beside her, Lieutenant Sarah Winters, her protege, her friend, her spotter, had been alive, whispering wind calls with quiet brilliance. A moment later, Winters had been gone, her chest torn open by a single perfect shot. A shot fired by Viktor Petrov. Morgan's throat tightened as her hands adjusted the rifle's scope, not from nerves, from memory. She should have walked away that day. She had promised herself she would never do this again, and yet here she was. Fire when ready, the range master called. The world stilled. The laughter, the wind, the doubts, the ghosts all fell away. Morgan breathed once, twice, listened. The wind spoke to her through the shifting flags, through the shimmering mirage above the earth, through the faint tug against her cheek. Her fingers settled on the trigger. And then she fired. The crack echoed across the valley. For 5 long seconds, silence. Even Hayes allowed himself the flicker of a grin. Then the spotter's voice came, strained with disbelief. Impact dead center. A murmur rippled through the SEALs. Hayes froze. Morgan adjusted nothing. She simply fired again, and again. Each round split the silence like a heartbeat. One by one, the spotter confirmed, dead center, dead center, dead center. 10 shots, 10 confirmations. And when the spotter finally lowered his scope, his voice shook. Sir, all 10 rounds. Same hole, I can't even distinguish them. It's a single tier, dead center. Silence, no laughter now, no muttered arrogance, only disbelief. Morgan rose from the bench, engaged the safety, and placed the rifle back down with the care of someone returning a sacred instrument. She did not look at Hayes. She did not look at anyone. She simply collected her notebook and turned away. But as she passed Hayes, her voice, low, calm, surgical, cut him open. You adjusted the scope. Next time try the windage knob instead, harder to detect, more impact at range. She walked away without looking back. And Hayes stood rooted to the ground, humiliated, exposed, and for the first time in years shaken by respect. From the tower, Colonel Blackwood's voice carried once more. Gentlemen, meet Lieutenant Colonel Catherine Morgan, United States Marine Corps, retired, former head of Scout Sniper School, Quantico, designer of the M210 targeting system you've been using. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Hayes felt his pride collapse in on itself. The woman he had mocked had just rewritten the laws of shooting before his eyes. And Blackwood, he felt no triumph, only dread. Because if Catherine Morgan was here, it meant the past had finally come home. What did it feel like to be outclassed in front of your own men? Jason Hayes had no answer. He stood frozen at the firing line, his arms hanging useless at his sides, while the woman he'd mocked walked away without even granting him the dignity of triumph. 10 shots, 1 hole. It was the kind of perfection snipers dreamt about, the kind of shot groups whispered in legends, and she had done it while he'd tried to sabotage her scope. His chest burned with humiliation, and something else he wasn't ready to name: respect. Around him the SEALs muttered, unsettled. Their laughter had turned to silence, their smirks into awe. The weapon wasn't faulty. The wind wasn't an excuse. The problem had been them. From the tower, Colonel Blackwood's voice broke the silence. Training begins at 600 tomorrow. Lieutenant Colonel Morgan will be your instructor. No arguments, no debate, it was an order. The men dispersed, but Hayes lingered, his eyes fixed on Morgan as she disassembled the M210 with deliberate, methodical care. He wanted to say something, to salvage pride, but no words came. So he left in silence, carrying with him the crack of each perfect shot like a wound that refused to close. That night the base armory was nearly empty. Fluorescent lights hummed, reflecting off steel racks of weapons. Morgan sat alone at a workbench, field-stripping rifles one by one, M40A6, SR-25, even a vintage Garand. She moved with quiet ritual, hands steady, motions automatic. She wasn't training, she wasn't reminiscing, she was reminding herself. Each weapon had its own voice, each demanded respect, and if she forgot that, if she trusted only the machine, she'd lose the edge that had once defined her. The door creaked open. Boots on concrete. She didn't look up. You didn't use the scope. Hayes's voice was quieter now, stripped of its earlier arrogance. Morgan slid the bolt from the SR-25, inspected it against the light. Not in the traditional sense. But I adjusted it, Hayes said, frowning. 3 clicks elevation, 2 minutes of angle at least. That should have thrown you off. She reassembled the rifle, placed it gently back into its case. You're right, it should have. Then how? She finally looked at him, her eyes steady. I calculated the correction in my head. Barrel harmonics, mirage, wind. When you spend 30,000 hours behind a rifle, you stop aiming. You start listening. Hayes shook his head. That's not possible. Her gaze didn't waver. It's not magic, it's discipline. 30,000 hours. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 15 years. The rifle becomes your nervous system. You stop thinking in clicks and adjustments. You feel. Hayes swallowed, the truth settling heavy. He had thought himself the best. But this was beyond anything he'd imagined. Morgan picked up another rifle. 600, Hayes, bring your team and leave your ego behind. Dawn. The first light crept over the eastern horizon as Morgan stood alone at the firing range. The air was still cool, damp with morning dew. She had been here for over an hour, setting up stations. 6 rifles, each calibrated for a specific shooter. Stocks adjusted for cheek welds. Triggers set for their preferred weights. Small details that said one thing: I know you better than you know yourself. The cadence of boots approached. The SEALs marched in, precise, silent. Hayes led them, jaw set, eyes focused. The swagger was gone. Something had cracked yesterday, and though his pride resisted, his professionalism pushed him forward. Lieutenant Colonel Morgan, he said, addressing her formally. Just Morgan, she replied, her tone even. I left that life behind. Today I'm your instructor. She gestured to the rifles. Each of you has a weapon calibrated to your measurements. Eye relief, cheek weld, length of pull. No excuses. If you miss, it's not the rifle, it's you. The men shifted uneasily. Personalization at this level usually took weeks. She'd done it overnight. Hayes frowned. What's the doctrine? Ghost protocol. The name hung in the air. None of them recognized it. Morgan lifted a small mirror, fixed at an angle to a rifle's scope. Standard sniper doctrine focuses on precision, breathing, trigger discipline, wind calls. But against someone like Viktor Petrov, it's not enough. You need to become invisible. Invisible, one of the SEALs muttered. Not literally, functionally. Her voice was calm, her eyes sharp. Every shot leaves evidence: muzzle flash, acoustic signature, scope reflection. A trained counter-sniper reads those signs like breadcrumbs. Ghost protocol eliminates the trail. She pointed at Hayes. "You first." He stepped forward, settled behind his rifle, sighted the target 1,000 meters out. His breathing slowed, his fingers squeezed. Crack. The round struck center mass. "Now look," Morgan said. On a monitor behind them, a thermal image displayed Hayes's position from the target's perspective. His barrel glowed like a beacon. His scope flashed with sunlight. His heat signature lingered. "That's what Petrov would see," Morgan said evenly. "You painted a target on your own head." She moved to his position, adjusted the mirror attachment. "Now, indirect observation. Use the reflection. Then roll 3 feet after your shot before reloading." Hayes hesitated. It felt unnatural, wrong, but he obeyed. The shot cracked slightly off-center, but the monitor showed the difference. The glare gone, the heat bloomed smaller. "Ghost protocol has 3 principles," Morgan said. "Indirect observation, position mobility, environmental masking. Master them and you're a ghost. Present only in the effect you create, never in your position." For the next 4 hours she drove them mercilessly. They fired, rolled, shifted, fired again. They masked muzzle flashes with environmental noise, a gust of wind, a passing vehicle, even the distant thud of artillery. She taught them to use natural cover to bleed off thermal signatures. She drilled them until sweat dripped from their brows and their arms ached from movements that defied instinct. By midday, the SEALs were silent, drained but transformed. During a short break, Hayes approached, wiping sweat from his forehead. His voice was quieter now. "These techniques, they're not in any JSOC manual." "They're not meant to be," Morgan said. Her gaze drifted to the horizon as though seeing something far away. "I developed them after Fallujah." Hayes studied her. "Winters, she was your spotter." For a moment Morgan's mask slipped, a flicker of pain. She was more than a spotter, brilliant, Harvard mathematician, could have done anything with her life. She chose the Marines. She believed in service above self. Morgan's voice faltered just slightly. "She would have surpassed me. She had a gift for reading wind, better than anyone I'd trained, and Petrov knew it. That's why he killed her first." Her eyes hardened. "He didn't kill me when he had the chance. He wanted me alive, to carry the weight, to remember." Hayes said nothing. For the first time he saw not just the sniper, not just the instructor, but the wound beneath, and it changed everything. Morgan turned, her voice sharp again. "Break over, back to work." From the observation tower, Blackwood watched it all. Beside him, CIA officer Richard Bennett leaned on the rail, his expression unreadable. "She's good," Bennett said. "Better than good," Blackwood replied. "But this isn't her at full speed. She's holding back." Bennett's eyes narrowed. "Will it be enough to prepare them for Petrov?" Blackwood's gaze never left Morgan. "No, not even close, but it's not about them. It's about her. When the time comes, she won't be able to stand aside. She'll pick up that rifle again." Bennett frowned. "And if she does?" Blackwood's voice dropped. "Then God help us all." Afternoon training pushed the men further. Morgan stripped them of electronic wind meters, ballistic computers. "Technology fails," she said. "Batteries die, systems glitch, but the air never lies. Learn to feel it." She walked them through reading mirage, detecting heat bands invisible to the naked eye. She made them close their eyes, breathe, and sense air pressure shifts. She drilled them in calculating Coriolis' effect without math, relying instead on instinct honed by repetition. By twilight, the seals were spent, but Hayes was alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. He had begun to feel the air differently, to notice the subtle density shifts, the layered heat bands. Morgan's words echoed, "Some people calculate, some people feel." And for the first time, Hayes wondered if he might be more than just a shooter. As the sun set, Morgan called them to the observation deck. She settled at the 1,800-meter mark, prone, rifle steady. "Watch closely," she said. "5 rounds, 5 conditions." She fired once. The shot landed, then again. Each round struck in a different position on the target, yet the pattern was perfect. A pentagon. Hayes realized, awe dawning, you adjusted to 5 wind shifts and made a perfect geometric pattern. Morgan rose, satisfied. That's what separates good from exceptional. Her eyes met his, and Petrov is beyond exceptional. The words hung in the dusk like a warning. Because somewhere unseen, Viktor Petrov was already watching. Why had he spared her? The question pressed at Catherine Morgan's mind as she walked back to her quarters that evening, the twilight air heavy with Carolina humidity. Training the SEALs had burned off the day's tension, but not the weight of memory. She had lived with it for years, the unanswered riddle of Fallujah. Viktor Petrov had been close enough to finish her, to put one more bullet in her skull after Sarah fell. But he hadn't. He had wounded her instead, then vanished into the ruins. Why leave her alive? Why leave her with ghosts? The answer she feared most was the simplest, because it wasn't about the mission. It was about her. Inside her quarters, the classified folder Bennett had promised waited on the table. Thick, heavy, marked with the kind of clearances that could bury careers. Morgan hesitated, staring at the folder as if it might bite. She had spent years trying to bury her past. Opening this file meant digging it back up. She opened it anyway. Surveillance photos, reports, psychological profiles, and then a face, pale eyes, weathered skin, nothing remarkable except the anonymity. Viktor Petrov, a man designed to blend into crowds, to vanish when needed. But the eyes, she knew them. She had seen them once across broken glass and smoke, looking at her not as prey but as a puzzle. Hayes knocked on the open door, hesitating before stepping in. Permission. She didn't look up. You're not military police. You don't need permission. He came closer, his eyes scanning the documents spread across the table. That's him. Morgan nodded. Viktor Petrov, son of Anatoly Petrov, former Spetsnaz, now FSB's best elimination specialist. Over 100 confirmed kills, dozens more suspected. Hayes leaned in, reading over her shoulder. Extreme patience, no stress response under fire, 9 days in one position without moving. He exhaled sharply. 9 days, that's not human. It's training, Morgan said flatly, and obsession. Her hand hovered over another page, one that made her chest tighten. A photo of a younger Petrov, 12 maybe, standing beside a man in Soviet uniform. His father, Anatoly. And behind them, blurred but unmistakable, stood Colonel Michael Blackwood, 30 years younger, in dress uniform, shaking hands with Soviet officers during a so-called exchange program after the Cold War. Morgan's blood chilled. He knew them. Hayes frowned. Blackwood. She shoved the photo across the table. He knew Victor's father. He met Victor, and he didn't tell me. Hayes straightened, unease creeping into his voice. You think he's hiding something? Morgan's jaw tightened. I think everyone is hiding something. She stacked the files, trying to keep her hands steady, but inside her pulse hammered. If Blackwood had known Anatoly Petrov, then this wasn't coincidence. This wasn't random. This was generational. And her father, Jonathan Morgan, had been CIA. She had been 12 when he died, told it was a heart attack. But now. She shoved the thought aside. Too dangerous, too heavy, not yet. Blackwood's office smelled faintly of old leather and cigars. He was reviewing security protocols when Morgan stormed in, the photo clenched in her hand. You knew him. Her voice was low, controlled, but vibrating with restrained fury. "You knew Anatoly Petrov, and you didn't tell me." Blackwood looked up slowly, eyes tired but steady. He gestured for her to sit. She didn't. "Yes," he admitted. "I met him. Cambodia, 1985. Later during the exchange programs in the 90s. And yes, I met Victor once as a boy." Her voice sharpened. "And you didn't think that mattered?" "It matters," Blackwood said quietly, "but some truths are buried for a reason." Morgan slammed the photo onto his desk. "Don't give me riddles, Colonel. Petrov killed Sarah Winters. He almost killed me. And now he's here. If there's something I don't know." The door opened. Richard Bennett stepped in, his face grave. "Then you'll both want to hear this." He dropped a fresh surveillance photo on the desk. Grainy, taken from a gas station security camera. Viktor Petrov, casual clothes, filling a sedan with gas. The timestamp, 6 hours ago, 30 miles from Camp Lejeune. Blackwood's jaw tightened. "He's here." Morgan stared at the photo, her stomach twisting. Not in Washington, not waiting for the president's daughter. Here. Hayes entered then, summoned by some instinct, carrying another file. "I've been reading through what you left in the armory," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "The Russians have been tracking you for years, Lieutenant Colonel. They have details on your deployments, your habits, even your shooting tendencies. Someone fed them intel." Bennett's eyes narrowed. "You're saying there's a leak?" Hayes nodded grimly. "It's too specific to be guesswork. They knew about Fallujah. They knew about Winters. This wasn't luck. Someone gave Petrov your file." The room went still. Morgan's voice came cold. "So I was never just a target of opportunity. I was hunted." Blackwood exchanged a dark look with Bennett. "If he's here, then the Washington op may be a feint. His real objective could be you." Bennett leaned forward. "Then we need to move you, secure location, now." But Morgan shook her head, her voice cutting through their urgency. "No, if I'm the target, then we use it. We set the battlefield. We end this." Blackwood's brow furrowed. "You want to use yourself as bait?" Morgan met his eyes, unflinching. "I want to finish what started in Fallujah." Hayes stepped closer, his voice firm. "Then you won't be alone. You'll need a team. You'll need us." For the first time, Morgan really looked at him. The arrogance was gone. The pride was cracked. What she saw instead was a man ready to listen, ready to fight beside her. She nodded once. "Then we do this my way. No standard playbooks. Petrov knows them all. We'll create something he won't expect." Bennett folded his arms. "What exactly are you proposing?" Morgan's answer was calm but laced with steel. "Ghost tandem." The room fell silent. Hayes frowned. "What's that?" "A theory Sarah and I developed," Morgan explained softly. "Two snipers working as one. Shooter and spotter but interchangeable. Split-second role reversals, perfect trust, intuitive coordination. We never got to use it in the field." Her eyes met Hayes's. "But maybe now it's time." Hayes held her gaze. "If you'll trust me to try." Her expression flickered, memory, doubt, pain, and then she nodded. "Then we'll need terrain that favors complexity, multiple elevations, variable winds, long and short ranges." Blackwood leaned back, thoughtful. "The old mountain warfare training ground, decommissioned but still within base perimeter, abandoned structures, ridges, valleys, perfect sight lines, perfect traps." Morgan's voice was steady. "Then that's where we finish it." Later in the armory again, Hayes lingered while Morgan packed her gear. He spoke without bravado, just quiet curiosity. "Why did you leave the field?" Her hands paused on a rifle case. The question hung heavy in the air. Finally, she answered, her voice low. "Have you ever watched someone die because of a decision you made?" Hayes's throat tightened. "Afghanistan. A teammate lost because he'd misread the wind." He nodded once. "Yes." Morgan's gaze met his. There was no judgment, only the recognition of shared weight. "Then you understand. After Sarah, I couldn't carry it anymore. not and remain effective, so I left. But you were the best, Hayes said. Her smile was bitter, fleeting. Being the best doesn't make you immune. It just makes the cost heavier. Because when you fall, you don't just fail yourself. You fail everyone who believed you couldn't. She closed the rifle case with finality. That's why I walked away. Hayes studied her, realizing something deeper. She wasn't afraid of Petrov. She was afraid of herself, of what she might become if she stepped back into the fight. But she already had. Later that night, Morgan spread the intelligence files again. Her eyes scanned details of Petrov's past, Chechnya, Ukraine, Syria. Patterns of not just elimination but psychological warfare. He didn't just kill, he dismantled, piece by piece. Support, spirit, identity. And then a page she hadn't seen before. A declassified CIA memo from 1985. Jonathan Morgan, her father, connected directly to Anatoly Petrov's capture. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just about Fallujah. This wasn't even about her. This was about fathers and children, about debts passed down, about ghosts refusing to die. She closed the folder, her breath unsteady. For the first time since she'd picked up a rifle, Catherine Morgan felt the true weight of inevitability. This wasn't just a mission. It was a reckoning written long before she was born. And it would only end one way. What does it take to become invisible? The thought whispered through Catherine Morgan's mind as the convoy climbed the winding road into the decommissioned mountain warfare training site. The night air was thin, crisp, the kind that carried sound farther than expected. She watched the tree line through the window, every sense sharpened, every instinct awake. Somewhere in these ridges, Viktor Petrov could already be waiting. The site had been abandoned for years, skeletal barracks, rusting vehicles, watchtowers half collapsed by storms. Perfect terrain for a sniper duel. Too much terrain, too many angles. And yet that was exactly why she had chosen it. Complexity was her ally. Simplicity was Petrov's. Hayes sat across from her in the transport, his gear neatly packed, his face set. He had come a long way since the day he mocked her at the firing line. The arrogance was stripped away. What remained was leaner, sharper, forged under her relentless instruction. "You're quiet," he said finally. Morgan's eyes stayed on the trees. Quiet is survival. Not always, he countered. Sometimes quiet gets you killed. Sometimes you need noise, distraction. She looked at him then, really looked, and allowed the faintest curl of a smile. "You've been listening." He shrugged. "You've been teaching." Their eyes held for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them, trust forming in the cracks where pride and grief had lived. Neither said it aloud, but both felt it. If Ghost Tandem was going to work, it couldn't be just technique. It had to be this: intuition, silent recognition, belief in the other. The convoy braked. The site loomed ahead, a collection of skeletal structures clinging to the ridgeline. Shadows stretched long in the moonlight. Colonel Blackwood was already there, waiting with Bennett and a small detachment of security. His face was drawn, older than the night before, as if the years of ghosts had finally caught up. "This is it," he said grimly. "You'll have one night to prepare. Petrov moves at dawn. We've intercepted fragments of his comms. He's coming." Morgan stepped out of the transport, her boots crunching gravel. She inhaled the mountain air, cold and biting, and let it settle into her lungs. This was it. They moved quickly. Hayes scouted elevations, marking crossfire points. Morgan mapped wind corridors, identifying how the valley channeled currents like a funnel. Together, they chose their positions, not fixed nests, but fluid zones designed for rapid shift. Ghost Tandem wasn't about one perfect shot. It was about rhythm. If Hayes fired, Morgan shifted. If Morgan spotted, Hayes countered. Each feeding the other, each unpredictable. Petrov would be forced to chase ghosts instead of pinning prey. As they worked, Hayes glanced at her. "You really think he'll come for you? Not Washington, not the president's daughter, you." Morgan's answer was quiet, steady. "I don't think I know." Hayes frowned. Because of Fallujah. Because of something older, she said. Her eyes were far away. Because my father humiliated his. Because Petrov was raised in the shadow of a debt he didn't choose. Because when he pulled the trigger that day, he wasn't ending a mission. He was beginning a game, and I was the only opponent that mattered. Hayes exhaled, the weight of her words settling in. So this isn't about politics, it's about legacy. Morgan nodded, and legacy doesn't negotiate. Later, as the moon climbed high, Hayes found her sitting alone on a crumbling wall, her rifle across her knees, staring into the valley. "Can't sleep?" he asked, settling beside her. "I stopped sleeping years ago," she murmured. For a long moment silence stretched between them, filled only by the whisper of wind through the trees. Finally, Hayes spoke. "You ever think about walking away, just disappearing, letting someone else handle this?" She didn't answer at first. Her eyes stayed fixed on the valley, as if she could already see Petrov's silhouette emerging from the darkness. Then she said softly, "Every day, but ghosts don't let you walk away. They follow, they wait, they remind you who you failed. Until you face them, you're never free." Hayes absorbed the words, feeling the truth in them. He had his own ghosts, he just carried them differently. "Then tomorrow," he said quietly, "we face them together." She glanced at him. There was no smile, no warmth, just the steady recognition of someone who had finally found a partner worthy of the burden. She nodded once. That was enough. At 300, Bennett monitored intercepted chatter. Russian frequencies, encrypted but cracked just enough to catch fragments. Words like target confirmed and valley approach. Petrov was moving. Blackwood studied the map, his face grim. "He's coming from the North Ridge. That gives him high ground and shadow until dawn." Morgan's voice cut through the tension. "Then we take his advantage and turn it into a trap." She sketched quickly on the map, her pencil moving with precision. "He'll assume I take the southern ridge. It's the most logical sniper position. But I won't. Hayes and I will split east and west, forcing him into a cross pattern. He'll think he's flanking me, but he'll be exposing himself to Hayes. And when he counters Hayes, he'll expose himself to me." Blackwood studied her plan, the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. "Petrov thinks 3 moves ahead. You're planning 5. Morgan's eyes were cold. "Sarah taught me that. She said the best way to beat a grandmaster is to change the game." The hours before dawn stretched long. The valley grew colder, the air thinner. Every sound seemed amplified, the rustle of branches, the creak of settling wood, the distant cry of an owl. Hayes lay prone on the west ridge, his cheek pressed against the stock, his eyes sweeping through the scope. Morgan mirrored him from the east, her breath slow, steady, blending with the rhythm of the wind. Neither spoke, words weren't needed now. And then a flicker, a shadow against the tree line. Movement too deliberate to be an animal, too patient to be careless. Morgan's heart slowed. She felt it before she saw it. Petrov. The ghost of Fallujah had come. She whispered into the calm, her voice barely audible. "Contact, North Ridge, 2 o'clock. Hayes adjusted, eyes narrowing. "Got him." But even as he sighted in, Petrov vanished. A shift, a roll, a silence. He was there and then he was. Morgan's pulse quickened. She knew this dance. He wasn't approaching. He was already inside the game. "Stay fluid," she murmured. "He's probing. He wants us to reveal." Hayes exhaled. "Then we give him nothing." Minutes passed like hours. Petrov's presence pressed in without sight. A snapped twig here, a flicker of shadow there. He was writing the battlefield in silence, forcing them to doubt every angle. Morgan closed her eyes for a moment, remembering Sarah. Her voice, soft and steady. "Don't chase him, make him chase you." She opened her eyes, her jaw tightening. Petrov wasn't the only ghost here tonight. At 4:37, the first shot cracked. Not at them, near them, a warning, a declaration. Hayes flinched, instinct driving him to roll. But the bullet had struck precisely between their two positions, a message carved into dirt. Morgan's stomach tightened. She knew what it meant. "I see you both," she whispered into the calm, her voice steady despite the weight pressing down. "Stay sharp. He's not just hunting, he's playing." The next move would decide everything. How do you fight someone who already lives inside your memory? The question pulsed through Catherine Morgan's veins as the sun's first light bled into the valley. The ridges glowed pale orange, the air sharpening with morning clarity. Every leaf, every rock, every shadow seemed carved in sharper relief. Dawn wasn't just light, it was exposure. And exposure was death. Petrov had fired only once. One perfectly placed warning round, the dirt scarred between her and Hayes. He didn't need to hit. Not yet. His message was enough. "I see you. I control the board." Hayes whispered through the calm, his voice taut. "He's taunting us." Morgan's eye stayed fixed on her scope, sweeping, scanning, refusing to blink. "No, he's anchoring us. He wants us to move. He wants to dictate the rhythm. And if we do, then he'll wait longer than you can." Silence pressed between them, thick and heavy. Hayes exhaled, trying to calm the tightness in his chest. He had trained for this, drilled in patience. But there was something about Petrov's presence, the invisible weight of him, that eroded resolve faster than bullets ever could. Morgan felt it too, the same dread she had felt in Fallujah, the knowledge that she wasn't just being hunted, she was being studied. Every shift, every hesitation, every exhale catalogued. Petrov wasn't here to kill quickly. He was here to dismantle. Minutes stretched, then a glint, barely perceptible high on the northern ridge. Morgan froze, glass reflection, scope. She steadied her breathing, aligning crosshairs. But before she could fire, the reflection vanished. Too fast, too practiced. Her stomach sank. It wasn't his scope. It was a decoy, a shard of angled glass set in place. He was baiting her. She murmured into the calm, "Decoy, don't take it." But Hayes had already shifted, his crosshairs locked on the spot, finger tightening. "Hayes, no," she snapped. Too late, crack. His round split the air, the decoy glass shattered. And instantly, Petrov answered. A shot screamed from the opposite ridge, grazing the rock inches from Hayes's face. Shards sprayed, cutting his cheek. He cursed, rolling instinctively to cover, heart hammering. Morgan's voice cut sharp in his earpiece. "That's what he wants. Overreaction. You fire, he maps your rhythm. You move, he narrows your box. Control yourself." Hayes pressed against the rock, blood warm on his cheek. His pride burned hotter than the wound. "He almost had me." "He didn't miss," Morgan said coldly. "If he wanted you dead, you'd be dead. He's playing with you." The words hit harder than the bullet. Hayes clenched his jaw, humiliated. But beneath it, something worse gnawed at him, fear. Petrov moved like smoke. Morgan caught glimpses, never enough to lock a shot. A flicker of fabric in the trees, a ripple of disturbed grass, a soundless shadow weaving the terrain like he owned it. And maybe he did. Every 20 minutes, another shot. Not at them, near them. One carved a notch in Hayes's rifle stock. Another split the ground a foot from Morgan's hand. Precision without purpose, except to remind them he could end it whenever he chose. It was a language, a cruel, deliberate language. "I am here. You are mine." Hayes's nerves frayed with each round. His breathing grew erratic, his grip tightening until his knuckles blanched. He whispered harshly, "Why doesn't he just shoot us? What's he waiting for?" Morgan's voice was steady, though her own chest constricted. "Because this isn't about killing. It's about breaking." She felt it, the old weight clawing back. Fallujah, the rooftop, Sarah's final breath, the way Petrov had let her live, branding her with failure. She swallowed hard, forcing the memory down. She couldn't afford to break again. Not with Hayes watching, not with Petrov listening. At 8:20, the silence shattered. A shot cracked so close to Hayes's position that his rifle flew from his hands, the stock splintering. He dove for cover, chest heaving, panic flooding. Morgan's voice sliced into his ear. "Stay with me, Hayes, breathe." But his voice came ragged. "He's inside my head, I can't." "Listen to me," she snapped. "You think you're the first. He did this to me, to Sarah, he lives for it. Don't give him what he wants." Hayes pressed his forehead into the dirt, trembling. He wanted to quit. He wanted to run. But her voice, sharp, relentless, steady, pinned him in place. "You are not broken," she said, each word a hammer. "You are not his prey. You are my partner. Ghost tandem doesn't work if you fold, so get up. Now." Something in her tone, the steel, the refusal to let him surrender, cut through the panic. His breath steadied. His hands stopped shaking. Slowly, he crawled back to his rifle, retrieved it, checked the chamber. "I'm here," he whispered. Morgan exhaled, relief hidden beneath her calm reply. "Good, now prove it." The duel escalated. Petrov shifted angles with terrifying speed, firing from east, then west, then north. Each time he left just enough signature for Morgan to glimpse him, but never enough to lock him down. He was toying with them, conditioning them to doubt. Morgan adapted. She began feeding Hayes information not as orders, but as questions. "Feel that wind shift. Where does it push your round?" Hayes adjusted, fired. His shot clipped a tree where Petrov had been seconds before. Morgan allowed herself a thin smile. He was learning, not calculating, feeling. Petrov's reply came instantly, a round that struck the dirt precisely where Hayes had rolled seconds earlier. "Close, too close." Morgan whispered, "He's mapping your instincts. Change the rhythm. Don't roll, crawl, disrupt." Hayes obeyed, shifting in a broken pattern. Petrov's next shot missed by a wider margin. For the first time, Hayes felt the faintest surge of hope. Maybe Petrov wasn't invincible. By late morning, exhaustion gnawed. Hours of stillness, of strain, of hypervigilance. The sun rose higher, baking the ridges. Sweat stung Hayes's eyes. His muscles screamed. Petrov's shots slowed, but the pressure didn't. It grew heavier, like a noose tightening. Morgan knew why. He was conserving, waiting, letting fatigue do the work. At 1100, another round cracked. This one was different. It wasn't near them. It wasn't a taunt. It struck the stone wall behind Morgan, chipping rock that sliced her cheek. She froze. That shot wasn't for Hayes. It was for her. Her mind jolted back. Fallujah, the rooftop, Sarah's blood. Her breath hitched. For a terrifying second, the valley disappeared. She was back there, kneeling in dust and smoke, Sarah's eyes wide and fatting. Petrov's shot still echoing in her skull. Her finger trembled on the trigger. "Morgan," Hayes's voice, urgent, scared. She blinked, shaking the ghosts away, forcing air into her lungs. "Focus. Now, not then." "I'm here," she said hoarsely. Hayes didn't press. He just said with a quiet strength, "Then let's finish this." They shifted positions again, fluid, unpredictable. Petrov fired less often now, but each shot was closer, sharper, more deliberate. He was closing in. And then Morgan saw it, the faint shimmer of heat against stone, a barrel hidden, aimed. She didn't fire, not yet. She whispered into the calm, "He's on me, East Ridge, 30 meters above, don't look, don't move, just listen." Hayes swallowed hard. "What do I do?" Her answer was calm, certain. "You trust me." She exhaled, timed the wind, and shifted a single inch. The shot screamed past where her head had been. Petrov had missed, deliberately, another message. But this one Morgan understood. It was, "I see you." It was, "This is between us." What if the real danger wasn't in the ridges at all? The thought crept into Catherine Morgan's mind as the sun climbed higher, shadows shortening, the duel tightening like a noose. For hours, she and Hayes had matched Petrov move for move, breath for breath. Each time he tried to break them, they bent but didn't snap. Ghost tandem was holding. But there was something else, a weight beyond the battlefield, a sense that someone somewhere was tilting the board. At 12:07, the comms crackled. Richard Bennett's voice tense, "We've got a breach." Morgan's pulse quickened. What kind of breach? Bennett answered flat, controlled but urgent. Our secure line to Langley. Someone piggybacked a transmission. Location of the training site. It's out. Blackwood's voice cut in, gravel deep. Petrov didn't find us. He was sent to us. The words struck harder than any bullet. Morgan's gut twisted. A mole. Hayes hissed into the comm. Inside our own command. Higher, Bennett replied grimly. Signals analysis confirms it. This wasn't just a leak. This was authorization. Someone wanted Morgan here, exposed, with Petrov. Morgan's jaw tightened. She whispered, almost to herself, "They didn't just let the ghosts follow me. They handed me to them." On the ridgeline, Petrov fired again. The round clipped a rusted signpost inches from Hayes' scope, close enough to rattle him. Hayes cursed, adjusting position. "Why not kill me? Why the games?" Morgan's reply was quiet but sharp. "Because he knows I'm listening. He's not talking to you, Hayes. He's talking to me." Another round cracked, striking stone by Morgan's boot. She didn't flinch. She read it for what it was, punctuation. Each shot part of a message only she could understand. Hayes muttered, "And what's he saying?" Morgan's voice was steady, but the edge of dread bled through. "That this isn't over until one of us decides it is, and he's betting I don't have the will." She forced her breath calm, even as old memories pressed in Sarah's last words, the crimson stain spreading, her own paralysis. Petrov had left her alive not out of mercy, but cruelty, to plant a seed of doubt so deep it might bloom at moments like this. But Hayes was watching her, depending on her. If she broke, he would too. She whispered more to herself than him, "Not this time." Back at command, Bennett rifled through intercepted comms, papers scattering. This mole isn't just feeding intel, they're coordinating timing. Petrov knew when we moved here. He knew when we'd split positions. Blackwood's face was grim, his hand clenched into a fist. "You think it's inside the Pentagon?" Bennett's eyes flicked up, calculating. "Not think. No. Someone high enough to greenlight transfers, scrub manifests, bury orders." Blackwood turned away, his voice heavy. "Then this isn't just a duel, it's theater. They want Morgan erased, but not by their hand, by his." His gaze fell on the map, the ridges marked with Morgan's strategy. And beneath his calm, something broke loose, because he remembered. The handshake with Anatoly Petrov, the promises made, the lies exchanged. The shadow war never ended. And now, Catherine Morgan was the debt collector. On the ridge, Hayes shifted. Sweat stung his eyes, but his voice steadied. "You think this mole wanted you gone because of Petrov, or because of something else?" Morgan didn't answer at first. Her eye stayed in the scope, sweeping, calculating. Then she said softly, "Because of my father." Hayes frowned. "Jonathan Morgan, he died of a heart attack." She almost laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "That's what they told me, but in the file there were gaps. And now Petrov is here carrying a debt across generations. My father and his father, ghosts breeding ghosts." She adjusted her aim, her tone iron. "This isn't just about Washington. It's not about Sarah. It's about legacy. And someone in our own government wants that legacy buried." Hayes swallowed. He had thought this was just another op, another mission. But listening to her, seeing her steady hands and haunted eyes, he realized this wasn't a story about politics. It was about bloodlines and betrayal, sins passed like inheritance. And he was part of it now. At 13:30, Petrov struck harder. A sudden volley, 3 shots in under 10 seconds from different angles. Hayes rolled, countered, fired, but each round missed. Petrov wasn't aiming for kills. He was hurting, pushing them where he wanted. Morgan caught it, the pattern, the arcs. He wasn't trying to hit them, he was shaping them. "He's driving us down," she whispered. Hayes panted, chest heaving. "Into what?" Her eyes scanned the valley floor, the abandoned barracks, her stomach clenched. A box. As if on cue, another round split the dirt in front of her. Another behind Hayes, walls closing. Hayes cursed, "He's got us penned." Morgan's voice hardened. "Not yet, Ghost Tandem doesn't get boxed. We shift the box." "How?" She exhaled, forcing calm. "By trusting me." Back at command, Bennett slammed a file onto the desk. "I found it. Authorization orders. Redacted but traceable. The mole isn't at Langley, it's higher, Joint Chiefs." Blackwood's face darkened. "Which one?" Bennett shook his head. "Name scrubbed. But the signature code matches someone who's been active since the Cold War. Someone who knew Anatoly. Someone who knew your unit." Blackwood's stomach dropped. He whispered almost to himself, "God help us." Because suddenly he realized the ghost wasn't just Petrov. It was in Washington, too. On the ridge, Hayes's panic began to edge back. His movements grew sharp, erratic. "We're pinned, Morgan. He's closing in. I can feel it." Her voice cut him, sharp but steady. "Hayes, look at me." Through the brush, across the distance, their eyes met. Hers were calm, unyielding, unbroken. "You trust me?" she asked. His throat tightened. He wanted to say no. He wanted to say he couldn't, but something in her eyes, the weight, the scars, the refusal to quit, anchored him. "Yes." "Then follow." She shifted, rolling sideways, not away from the box but deeper into it. Hayes hesitated, then mirrored her. They moved in sync, unpredictable, fluid. Ghost tandem. Petrov's next shot cracked but missed. Morgan whispered, "Now he's chasing us." And for the first time, the ghost of Fallujah wasn't just defending. She was hunting. By 1500, the duel had changed shape. No longer two prey boxed by a predator. Now three ghosts weaving the ridges, each move countering, each silence louder than gunfire. Hayes whispered, "How long can this last?" Morgan's voice was low, certain. "Until one of us breaks." Her cheek pressed against the stock. Her finger curled on the trigger, and her heart, heavy with years of ghosts, whispered a truth she had always feared. This doesn't end with survival. It ends with a shot that echoes for generations. And in that moment she knew. Tomorrow or today. Her father's ghost, Sarah's memory, Petrov's legacy, they would all end in the crack of a single round. And she prayed she would be the one to fire it. How much can a body endure before the mind fractures? Jason Hayes was close to finding out. The sun burned overhead, the ridges shimmering with heat. Hours of pressure, hours of silence punctuated by perfectly timed cracks had stripped him raw. Petrov wasn't just shooting at them, he was peeling them, layer by layer. At 16:04 the shot came, a low-angle ricochet. It struck Hayes in the shoulder, tearing through muscle. He cried out, dropping his rifle as pain seared down his arm. He rolled, clutching the wound, blood slick between his fingers. Morgan's breath froze. She saw it all, the angle, the precision. Petrov hadn't aimed for a kill. He had aimed for weakness. Hayes gasped through the calm, "I'm hit. I can't." "You can," she cut in, voice sharp as a blade. "It's muscle, not bone. You can still hold a rifle." Her eyes scanned, searching for the angle of Petrov's shot, but he was gone again, melted back into the ridges. Hayes's breathing was ragged. He's breaking me, Morgan." Her chest tightened. She remembered Sarah, how Sarah's last breath had sounded the same, ragged, panicked, final, and for a heartbeat the valley blurred. But then she forced it back, "Not this time." She crawled to Hayes, her presence solid, grounding. She gripped his good shoulder. "Listen to me. You're not broken, you're bloodied. There's a difference, and if you quit now, he wins. He doesn't get to win." Hayes met her eyes, sweat and blood streaking his face. Something in her steadiness, her refusal to waver, anchored him. He nodded once, teeth clenched against the pain. "Then we finish it." From the northern ridge, Petrov watched through his scope, expression unreadable. He had studied Morgan for years. He knew her scars, her failures, her ghosts. And yet she was still here, stronger than the files suggested, stronger than memory painted. His lips curved in the faintest smile. This was why he hadn't killed her in Fallujah, Not mercy, not mistake, anticipation. He wanted her sharpened, not broken, because only then would the final shot matter. He whispered in Russian, almost to himself, "One ghost must bury the other." And then he moved again, silent as the wind. By late afternoon, Morgan and Hayes had shifted deeper into the valley, using ruins for cover. Hayes's arm was bound with torn fabric, blood slowed but not stopped. He gritted through pain, forcing his rifle steady. "Why doesn't he just finish us?" he muttered. Morgan's reply was quiet, steady. "Because death isn't his victory, breaking us is." Hayes exhaled hard. "Then don't give him what he wants." She glanced at him, not as an instructor, not as a superior, but as a partner. "I won't, neither will you." They crawled into new positions, ghost tandem still holding despite the wound. Morgan spotted, Hayes fired. Petrov dodged. Hayes spotted, Morgan fired. Petrov vanished. Each exchange was a breath in a storm, neither side gaining ground. But Petrov was tightening, each round closer, each silence heavier. The circle was closing. Back at command, Bennett slammed a headset onto the table. "We're losing them out there. Petrov's got the upper hand, if we don't intervene." Blackwood cut him off, voice like stone. "If we intervene, they die faster. Petrov will sense it. He'll adapt. This isn't our fight, it's hers." Bennett stared at him. "You're gambling 2 lives on a woman carrying ghosts and a seal bleeding out." Blackwood's eyes were cold, haunted. "No, I'm betting on the only person Petrov has never beaten." At 17:15, Petrov struck again. This time from the east ridge, a perfect angle. His round shattered Hayes's scope, spraying glass across his face. Hayes reeled back, vision blurred, cut bleeding across his forehead. Morgan's pulse spiked. She fired instantly, 3 rounds in quick succession. One struck stone, another clipped bark, the third echoed hollow, empty air. Petrov had moved again. Hayes groaned, struggling to clear his vision. "I can't see. My scope's gone." Morgan's stomach sank. Ghost tandem was broken. She was alone in the rhythm now. But Hayes gripped her arm with his bloodied hand, his voice fierce despite the pain. "Then finish it. Don't carry me like you carried her. Don't let him live inside your head anymore. You end this, Morgan. Do you hear me?" Her throat tightened. Sarah's face flashed before her. The rooftop, the blood, the silence. She had carried that failure for years, but Hayes was giving her a gift Sarah never could: permission. Her jaw set, her voice steady. "Then I will." Petrov shifted closer, his shots sharper, more deliberate. One tore through the edge of Morgan's pack. Another split stone inches from her temple. He was closing for the kill. Morgan pressed her cheek to the stock, every nerve alive. She felt him now, not in sight, not in sound, but in instinct. The valley hummed with him. Her calm crackled faintly. Bennett's voice: "Morgan, pull back, regroup, you can't." She ripped the earpiece free. No more voices, no more ghosts, just her rifle, and the man who had haunted her every breath. As the sun dipped toward evening, shadows lengthened. The valley cooled, and Morgan knew the final act had begun. She whispered into the silence, words Petrov could never hear but would somehow understand. "This ends with me." She shifted, slow, fluid, every motion precise. Her scope swept the ridges, and then a shimmer, barely there, heat bending over stone. Her breath slowed, her finger tightened. But before she fired, Petrov's round cracked first. It struck Hayes's leg, tearing flesh, dropping him flat with a cry. Not fatal, not meant to be, just one more piece of pressure. Morgan's chest constricted, rage surged. For a split second she almost broke discipline, almost rushed the shot. But then Hayes's voice, weak but defiant, cut through. "Do it, Morgan, end him." Her finger steadied. And for the first time since Fallujah, she wasn't shooting for survival. She was shooting for freedom. Petrov, perched in shadow, exhaled. He had her now, he could feel it. But as he sighted, something shifted. She wasn't where she should have been. She wasn't rolling the way she always had. For the first time in years, Viktor Petrov felt doubt. And Catherine Morgan fired. The shot cracked, the echo rolling across the valley like thunder. And silence followed. Had she hit him? Had she missed? She kept her eye on the scope, refusing to blink, refusing to breathe. Across the ridge, the shimmer was gone. And for the first time in her life, Morgan didn't know if the ghost was dead or simply waiting. What does silence mean on a battlefield? Catherine Morgan held her breath, her eye locked to the scope. The valley stretched out before her in unbearable stillness. Her last shot still echoed in her bones. The shimmer on the ridge was gone. No movement, no counterfire. Hayes groaned behind her, clutching his bleeding leg. "Did you get him?" Morgan didn't answer. She couldn't, not yet. The wind whispered through the trees. Dust hung in the air. Every second stretched thin, waiting for the retaliation that never came. And then nothing, only the mountain breathing. Slowly, she lowered her rifle, her hands trembling with the weight of possibility. Had she killed him, or had she simply forced him deeper into shadow? Back at command, Bennett's headset buzzed with static. He leaned forward, adjusting dials, searching for confirmation. Thermal scan coming through. The screen flickered, grainy shapes. 2 heat signatures in the valley, Morgan and Hayes. Nothing on the ridge. Blackwood's voice was low, controlled. "He's gone." Bennett frowned. Gone as in dead or gone as in vanished? Blackwood didn't answer because he knew. With Petrov, silence was never certainty. Morgan crawled to Hayes, binding his leg with steady hands. He winced but gritted through it, eyes still searching her face. "You don't know if you hit him." Her jaw tightened. "No." "But you believe you did." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw the blood, the sweat, the grit holding him together. He had followed her into hell and hadn't quit, even when Petrov tried to break him. That mattered more than certainty. "I believe he's finished," she said quietly. Hayes nodded once. That was enough. Extraction arrived at dusk. The valley bathed in fatting gold, the silence heavy as they carried Hayes out. Morgan followed, her rifle slung across her back, her steps steady but her mind storming. Every face that looked at her, the medics, the operators, the security detail, carried the same unspoken question. "Did you kill him?" She gave them no answer, because the truth wasn't in the shot. The truth was in what the shot meant. Hours later, back at command, Bennett laid a folder on the table. "We've confirmed it. The mole came from inside the Pentagon. Authorization signatures trace back to a Cold War committee, one of the Joint Chiefs." Morgan's stomach turned. "Why?" Bennett's voice was heavy. "Because they didn't want Petrov captured. They wanted you erased. You were the last living link to Jonathan Morgan, to operations they buried decades ago." Blackwood's eyes darkened. He looked older, worn. "Your father exposed Anatoly Petrov in '85. He compromised entire Soviet networks. The Petrov family never forgave it, and some in our government never forgave him for the fallout." Morgan stared at the table, the pieces clicking into place. Her life, Sarah's death, Fallujah, all threads of a web spun long before she picked up a rifle. Her voice was low, flat. "So I wasn't just Petrov's target, I was theirs." Bennett didn't argue. He didn't need to. Later, in the quiet of the barracks, Morgan sat alone with her rifle across her knees. Hayes was stable, sedated, his wounds cleaned. The SEALs who had once mocked her now watched her with something approaching reverence. But reverence didn't heal ghosts. She ran her hand along the stock, the cold steel familiar yet heavier than ever. Sarah's voice whispered in memory, "Don't chase him, make him chase you." For years she had lived as prey to a ghost. Now she had faced him, maybe killed him, maybe not. But the difference was this: he no longer lived only in her head. He lived in the shot, in the silence, in the valley they had shared. And silence, she realized, was its own kind of ending. Blackwood found her there, sitting in the dim light. He didn't speak at first. He simply stood, a soldier carrying his own ghosts, watching her with something between pride and sorrow. Finally, he said, "You gave him what he came for." Morgan's eyes lifted. "And what was that?" "A reckoning." Blackwood's voice cracked with old weight. "Some ghosts don't fade, they demand blood. Yours, his, anyone's, but you stood. That's more than I did." She shook her head. "You kept secrets that nearly killed us." Blackwood nodded, unflinching. "And you carried them further than anyone should. Maybe now you put them down." He left her then, alone with her rifle and her ghosts. At dawn, Morgan walked to the edge of the base, the horizon painted in soft pink and gold. She carried the rifle, but not as a weapon, more like a burden she was ready to set down. Hayes was awake, limping but upright, his arm in a sling. He joined her, silent for a moment as they watched the sun rise. Finally, he said, "You think he's really gone?" Morgan's eyes stayed on the horizon. "Does it matter?" Hayes frowned. "Doesn't it?" She turned to him then, her gaze steady. "He doesn't own me anymore. Dead or alive, he's just a man, and I'm still here." Hayes studied her, then nodded, because he understood. Sometimes victory wasn't a confirmed kill. Sometimes it was survival with dignity intact. Weeks later, the Pentagon buried the mole's name under redactions. The official report called the mountain duel a counter-sniper exercise with hostile interference. Petrov's name was never written. Catherine Morgan's wasn't either. But the men who had watched her, who had trained under her, carried the memory like scripture. The woman who hit 100 straight shots, the woman who stood against a ghost. And Morgan herself. She didn't seek recognition, she didn't want medals, she carried only silence. That night alone, she wrote Sarah's name in her worn notebook, not under loss, under debt repaid. And as she closed the notebook, she whispered into the quiet, "Rest now, I finally can." Because sometimes redemption doesn't arrive with applause or headlines. Sometimes it arrives in silence, in the stillness after the last shot, in the courage to walk forward without fear. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.